Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Player Display. I know I got a really fancy turntable now. Pretty neat, huh? But anyways, today we are going to have a look at the NECA Ultimate Creature from the Black Lagoon. Sorry, let me say that better. Creature from the Black Lagoon. So this is pretty much the last monster of the lineup chronologically, as he appeared in the 50s, and after that, that was pretty much the lull for the golden age of Universal Monsters. It pretty much ended with the Creature, also known as the Gill Man, and they released this figure recently. I've had him for a while, and I really do adore him. Really, he's a phenomenal figure. I mean, what else are we expecting from NECA? For them to crank out a dud? That's not the case these days. They always know what they're doing, and the figures that they come out with are absolutely glorious to look at. We've reviewed several in the past. I mean, we had to look at Invisible Man, looked at Dracula, Frankenstein, and I think a few others in there, Bride as well. And now we got the Creature here, and he's just going to add an extra splash of color to the display, and I'm so excited. Yes, the pun was intended. Thanks for noticing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and have a look. Firstly, of course, let's start off with the box, which starts up with the theatrical poster for the film, and in hindsight, as many of them are, they're a little more funny than they are epic, but kind of a little bit of both. But they seem to always have the running theme of woman is beautiful, monster is bad, monster loves woman, woman runs from monster, woman saved by men, monster killed or scared away by men. That's pretty much how all the movies came out, but they always gave us some really awesome monsters to influence film throughout the decades. So, can you really complain? But regardless, this still really is an awesome poster. I'm really happy to be adding this to my collection. So we got Creature from the Black Lagoon, we have the Creature, we have a female lead over here as well. Then we have the names of the actors. I have Ultimate Creature from the Black Lagoon. On this side, we have the Creature with his more placid-looking expression. Off to this side, we have him once again a little bit more dynamic, reaching up like he's swimming through the water, almost like Jaws. To the back, you have various display options with his many interchangeable hands and heads. So let's have a look at Gill Man. He was actually so tall, I was not able to fit him on camera, so I had to raise my tripod a little bit. But starting over here at this initial head sculpt, oh man, isn't it delightfully hokey and cheesy looking as it should be? Of course, this is a guy in a full body costume, and I love how this figure kind of finds a balance between realism and cheesiness. I think it just hits that nail right on the head, like between the glosses, the shapes, the choice whether to go with a shine or a matte coat, as we'll look at when we get down to the chest. That kind of creates that contrast. But I don't know what it is they did here, but the choices they made throughout are really what makes this figure believable, not as just as a costume, but as its actual film counterpart. But looking here at Gill Man, once again, we got him with his gills off to the side, which are looking absolutely beautiful. Looks like an actual fish you'd find in a tank. Just got those little ruffles there, got the gills underneath and everything. Got these red lips. Yeah, these very hollow, deep sunken blue eyes, which are really creepy, and one of my favorite parts of this design. I just love how we have all this green, then we have a little bit of blue up there to accent everything. I guess that goes with the lips as well, but just adds a little bit of an extra detail to punch out of this overall saturated green and gold design. And speaking of gold, that's one of the really interesting creative liberties that they took when making this figure. I guess there has been merchandise for the Creature for many decades, but I think this is the first time we're getting a definitive action figure of him, where we could say, yeah, these are probably the colors that he had, but I really love that he's got these accents of gold, a little bit of yellowing in there, and it just makes him feel, well, more fish-like, and it looks absolutely amazing. Going around the arms, and we'll just go ahead 360 over here, you can actually see off to the side, this is my favorite part of the figure, easy, is we have this big old fin going from the top of the head all the way down along the back to the base of the spine, and it just looks insanely good. It looks like an actual aquatic organism, which I think is really amazing and quite a feat for a toy company to be making. I mean, it just looks very believable. And now I use the word believable, But there's one part of this figure that is not believable, which I think makes it all the better. When we go ahead and look at the torso over here, of course, we got all the scaling components, and then we come down here at the abs. It is noticeably unpainted. It's very flat. I really love the fact that they did that. Again, it makes it feel more like a costume, almost like the big old hokey Godzilla costumes and stuff like that. So that's just like a little detail that pulls the realism away just a little bit to remind you of what you're looking at. And I don't know, that just I love that. I love that it's got that contrast between all this realism throughout the rest of the figure. Then you got just some plain flat green in the center. That was deliberate, it was intentional, and I love that they did that. It looks so good. Obviously, I've probably said my praises enough by this point, but this is a review, so we gotta look at the rest of the figure. Going down along the arms, we got more of those, like, overlaid scale patterns going around. And we also got those fins on the back of the elbows looking absolutely crisp and beautiful. And by the way, all the fins are made of a pretty stiff plastic. They're not rubbery or anything like that, not that much. So you don't have to worry about them being warped, I suspect. They're pretty nice. And going over to one of the hands, he has a lot of hands, but just look at one of them. Oh man, the details are so good. I love the webbed fingers. You have this very matted looking palm. Off to the outside, it continues with that shininess. And you got these very gold looking fingers over here. James Bond references aside. And oh man, it's so good. And then we go down here to the pelvic area. More fishy looking details. I also love how this back fin that we are looking at kind of branches off into two fins in the back of the thighs. I find that really interesting. And it's something you wouldn't have noticed in the movie. That's one of the great things about these Universal Monsters figures is now that we've got a tangible representation of these characters, there's so many little details that we've never noticed before that we could finally spot for the first time at our leisure, just as we're casually playing with them or displaying them. And it's just really a joy. I love what NECA is doing. I know I've said that so many times already, but continuing on, more of the scales going down the legs, more of that almost 2D-ness, I suppose you could say, in the calf area, which I really like. It almost feels like a rubber, I suppose, is the best way I could describe it. But you could see that the scaling details kind of fade away. They're no longer there. And, oh, it's just so good. But then you get a little bit more realism when we come back to the feet. And then you can see here, it's a little more glossy. You got the gold again, matches more in tandem with the hands that we just looked at. But yeah, even at the bottom of the feet, not a lot of paint going on. They still did some sculpted details, and they didn't even have to do that, but they did it, and I love them all the more for it. So, man, they knocked it out of the park yet again. I mean, when don't they? These days, quality control never an issue, painting never really an issue. They just make them good. What else more can I say? Now here we are at accessories where things get a little bit redundant, but by no means are these accessories bad. They're absolutely great and they fit the character beautifully. So let's go ahead and look at the alternate head sculpts. Over here, this is probably my favorite one. It's a mouth partly open, just a little bit. Gives him a little bit more of that Muppet nature, which I really like, as I've said before. But again, the paint scheme's consistent. There's no weird, awkward variations or anything to speak of. Got those shimmery golds, you got the glossy, slimy green, got the lips, got the eyes. Everything's there, looks fantastic. And then as for this other alternate head here, if you really want a singing fish, then this is the way to go. I'm looking at the product shots. I was actually convinced this would be an alternate head with an articulating jaw or something like that, but that's not a big deal. I really could have gone either way, but if you have an articulated jaw, then that would actually break up the sculpt. So the fact that they gave us 3 heads instead of one stoic and then one articulated is very nice. They're putting in a little bit of extra effort knowing that this is a character who doesn't hold a lot of accessories. There aren't many objects or things that he interacts with. So in that case, they go ahead, give us an extra head sculpt or 2, and that just helps to butter him up a little bit. And then he has 6 more hands, so I will go ahead and look at each pair individually. So over here we have more a clasping or reaching out, I suppose. These are probably my favorites. They're a lot more dynamic than the rest of them. You hear that? That's a bathtub going on above me right now, fittingly enough. Speaking of that, I also had a flood in my friggin' apartment again, so that's kind of why I wanted to review this guy as well. Just a lot of water stuff happening recently. But anyways, back to the figure. Over here we have 2 other alternate hands. This time the fingers are curled in just a little bit more, kind of a mean between extremes compared to the rest of the other hands. I don't know. It really depends on what situation you're getting your figure into. I mean, in this case, I guess he could be playing the piano. I'm really not too sure, but there you are. You got your options. And then as for these ones, they're more splayed out, almost floating back a little bit. So these are probably best as his swimming hands. He's paddling around, trying to swim up to the closest lady that he can find and drag him back down or whatever. But yeah, these look great. The paint's consistent across all of them. I'm not noticing any articulation or paint problems. I mean, everything's great. It's a beautiful figure with beautiful accessories to boot. Now let's go ahead and do some part swaps. So let's go ahead and start with the head sculpt over here. Let's go ahead and give that the usual twist and pull right there. It is one neck for all of them. They do not come with separate neck pieces like I believe some of the other Universal monsters did. So there's your look at the neck. Pretty stumpy, pretty scaly as it should be. Put that to the side. Now we'll go ahead and I guess we'll get the screaming head on because he is quite vocal actually, even though he is a very shy creature. Overall, I mean, then he can get pretty aggressive, but you know what I mean. He's a very passive aggressive Universal monster, but when he's on the aggressive side, this is probably the head sculpt that you want to go with. Now, as I struggle a little bit to get it on, I will say that the one accessory that I wish he came with, even though he probably wouldn't be holding it, there we go, is the fossilized Gillman hand that they find at the very beginning of the movie. I just think that would have been very nice as kind of as a display option to put around him, or maybe like a little coral reef or something like that, just some aquatic life. I think that would have been really interesting. Or a figure stand to make it look like you're swimming in the water, but then again, if you collect DC Multiverse, if you just own one Superman, you might already have a figure stand anyways. But anyways, let's go ahead and switch out some hands. So let's go ahead and get one of the grasping hands on over here. Give that a twist. And pull. Yeah, I haven't done this very often, so obviously there's a little bit of tightness. Go ahead and pour it on this grabby hand right there. And that looks fantastic. I mean, just simply by changing out those parts alone, you've totally changed the attitude of this figure. Ooh. That's some good thumbnail material. I'll think about that. And then let's go ahead and change out one more hand. So we'll go over here to the righty. Pop this one out as well. Come on, you. There we go. And then we'll do one of the alternate swimming hands. The one that's a little more splayed backwards. And slot that on. Little pop. And there we go. Looking great. So we can get those hands just like that. And yeah, you know what? I really think that a figure stand is the one thing that this guy requires to help him really stand out. So if you got a figure stand lying around, definitely give that a shot. He deserves to be swimming around your display. He'd look absolutely fantastic. Before we get into our articulation, I went on and I threw on that last head sculpt, which again is kind of in the middle, not quite open, not quite close. It's just like in the nice sweet spot. And this is a very good head sculpt as well. Actually, I'm kind of falling more partial to the screaming head that we have over here. I just feel like it's very situational, a little bit more of an extreme portrait to have with him. But really, it's whatever your pleasure is. They're all good. But anyways, that's the third head sculpt. And let's go ahead into our articulation segment. So let's start off with the head. I imagine they all articulate the same, but we have a joint beneath the neck and above. So we got a dumbbell joint and then a ball joint. Oh my god. Hold on a minute. Technical difficulties. Gillman meets Ishmael. How about that? So we got that much down. We got some back, but you notice that when these fins line up, it actually creates a stiffness, so it won't go any further than that. But if you want him to go back a little bit, you can go ahead and rotate that neck joint, so a little bit of fin gets in the way, and then you can crank him up a little bit more. So if you want him like swimming forward a little bit, that is an option for you. So we'll go ahead and reset that as we move on to, that's really not going to stay on. All right, that should do it. Let's go to the arms. They do 360 swivel, although because of the sculpt and the nature of the costume, you do have a lot of shoulder here that kind of bulks it out, so it doesn't go straight up, but that's all right. As for the elbows, I love how they made the joint so seamless when you go ahead and do the double joint, and it does go past 90, which is fantastic. This is accomplished with a soft piece that's right here, so that allows you to go a little past 90. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that the arms do come up past 90, which is really good. And he should have some swivels in the elbow as well, which is also very good. In each of the joints at the double jointed elbow, that's totally insane. And then you got the wrists, they do swivel. All the hands hinge out and in, might vary depending on which hands you choose. Down to the torso, where the joints are so well hidden in the sculpt, it's hard for me to find sometimes, but you got a ball joint right beneath the pecs, the swivel, does some tilt, does some forward, does some back. It pretty much stops where the fins begin. Then he does have a waist joint as well. I don't think... No, there's a waist joint. Okay, I just need to push it a little bit, but it does break up the sculpt, so I'd be reluctant to move that, but he does swivel down there if you so desire to have him do so. Then we can go ahead down to the legs. They do a full splits, looking very nice. The kick forward don't quite hit 90 because, again, we got all that extra sculpting over there, which I'm totally good with. It's so beautiful. I don't mind if there's any hindrances in articulation at all. As for the knees, double jointed. It doesn't quite kick all the way back, but that's totally all right. I don't think you need more than that. As for the ankles, they go a little bit back, a fair amount more forward, and you also got your patented rocker, which is actually really damn good. So there we are. There's our Fishman. Now here we are at size comparisons, and one thing I did not expect is that the creature is actually one of the taller guys. So over here we have more entries from NECA's Universal Monsters, of course. Absolutely love all of them. We have the Invisible Man with custom soft goods. We also have the Phantom of the Opera. And then over here we have Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster, whatever. We've all had that discussion already. But yeah, those are pretty much to the top of their heads, almost exactly the same height. So they're definitely meant to be the taller guys in the foreground of your display. But oh man, I love them both so much. Again, I'm probably going to have our Fishman in the back, suspended in the air a little bit. I think it'll look very good. We also have our Mythic Legion's Gold Knight 2, just for 6-inch comparison, whereas over here we have our 7-inch scale. And then down here, of course, we have our Star Wars The Black Series, Mecha.
The deep blue sea isn't Muck's natural habitat. I wish I was a blue fish with short-term memory loss so I could forget this entire thing.
And that's going to be about line and sinker for this Gill man over here. Honestly, he might be one of my new favorites. I wouldn't say that Creature from the Black Lagoon is one of my top 3 or even 5 Universal Monsters movies, but there's something about the creature that does have a certain mystique to him. I don't know what it is. Like, it's not just me, but it's everyone really. Just that allure that he has. I don't know, I guess just the excitement of going underwater and discovering new species, just the thrill of that sort of aquatic environment with all the boats and everything. I think that was one of my favorite parts of the movie, just the fact that we had an almost naval setting. I think that was really cool and very different for the movies at the time. But all that being said, the figure itself, as he stands, he's absolutely remarkable to look at. You got the fluxes of gold in there, then you've got that pro-dominant green, and then you also have it interchanging between gloss, then matte coat, gloss, then matte coat, and that kind of gives him that costumey feel, as I keep talking about. Really, I can't rant and rave about this figure enough. There's just so many great aspects about him that really the sculpt kind of just speaks for itself. That's really its strong suit, but then it's complemented with the paint. I mean, there's just so many great little elements. I mean, you gotta see it to believe it. That's how good this figure is. He doesn't have a lot of varied accessories, but he doesn't really need them. Again, maybe he could have had like a coral reef, or he could have had that fossil, or maybe even like a harpoon or something like that somebody else could hold. But everything he comes with is nothing bad either. There's nothing more than he needs, except a figure stand. I really want to see him up and about. I think that would be beautiful. But all that being said, very good figure. Do I recommend him? Obviously, yes. He's a really beautiful figure. Of course, if you're into the older movies, especially horror films, then this is an essential. You need your Fishman for your shelf, and he'll blend in beautifully with all your other Universal monsters. He doesn't feel out of place at all. If anything, he enhances the display. He just makes it feel a little bit more larger than life, especially when you have all these dark, cloaked, shady characters. Then you got a fish. That just does a lot for me, and it'll do a lot for you too, I'm sure. So, if you enjoyed this review and would like to see more, then please, as per usual, be sure to
like, comment,
ring the bell to be notified of our latest arrivals, and subscribe.
This is the editor speaking, humbly reminding you to support the pod Patreon in the description to guarantee new content every single week.
Thank you guys very much for watching. Rock on, and I will see you all later.